rulers take counsel together against Yahweh and against anointed.
All right, that's enough. It took too long to get the intro music. I forgot to put it on when I started streaming, so I'm just going to skip that. And we did. Shorten intro. Enough time passed. Just wanted like a minute to go by. All right, we're continuing in the book of Psalms, Psalm 55. And we're picking up at verse 19. Let's read the whole thing just so we can get context. All right. Maskil, instruction. A psalm of David. Give ear to my prayer, O God, and hide not thyself from my supplication. Attend unto me, and hear me. I mourn in my complaint, and make a noise, because of the voice of the enemy, because of the oppression of the wicked. For they cast iniquity upon me, and in wrath they hate me. My heart is sore pained within me, and the terrors of death are fallen upon me. Fearfulness and trembling are come upon me, and horror hath overwhelmed me. And I said, Oh, that I had wings like a dove, for then I would fly away and be at rest. Lo, then I would wander far off and remain in the wilderness. Selah. I would hasten my escape from the windy storm and tempest. Destroy, O Lord, divide their tongues, for I have seen violence and strife in the city. Day and night they go about it on the walls thereof. Mischief and sorrow also and sorrow are in the midst of it. Wickedness is in the midst thereof. Deceit and guile depart not from her streets. For it was not an enemy that reproached me. Then I could have borne it. Neither was it he that hated me that did magnify himself against me. Then I would have hid it myself from him. But it was thou, a man mine equal, my guide, and mine acquaintance. We took sweet counsel together, and walked into the house of God in company. Let death seize upon them. Let them go down quick into hell, for wickedness is in their dwellings, and among them. As for me, I will call upon God, and the Lord shall save me. Evening and morning and at noon will I pray, and cry aloud, and he shall hear my voice. He hath delivered my soul in peace from the battle that was against me. For there were many with me. Many against me, is what it means. God shall hear, and afflict them, even he that abideth of old. Selah. Because they have no changes, therefore they fear not God. He hath put forth his hands against such as be at peace with him. He hath put forth his hands against such as be at peace with him. He hath broken his covenant. The words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet they were drawn swords. Cast thy burden upon the Lord, and he shall sustain thee. He shall never suffer the righteous to be moved. But thou, O God, shalt bring them down into the pit of destruction. Bloody and deceitful men shall not live out half their days, but I will trust in thee. Okay, so we got up to verse 19. We really kind of just did look at the first half. I mean, there's not much to talk about. It was at the second half of verse 19 that we were really discussing. Well, let me clear something. I wish I could, whatever. All right, so because they have no changes, therefore they fear not God. So I remember reading that in the past, and I had this. I thought about it wrong, and I'm not going to try to describe my misunderstanding of it, because I think it's what it clearly means is, nothing changes. Things keep going as they were. The apostles, was it in Peter, in the book of Peter, it says there's that part where it talks about, um, so, you know, since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they have from the foundation of the world. In the last days, there will come scoffers, saying, where is the promise of his coming? It makes me think of that kind of an attitude also. Everything's the same. Everything continues as it always has. There's nothing. There's no change. I mean, I can't point to anything that shows like the action of God, like changing the world. They get away with their evil deeds. People, they hide the body and they get away with it, and then they think, I'm just using that as a metaphor, and then they think, oh, I've escaped judgment. I've escaped punishment. Things don't change. They don't fear God. They're able to carry off their wicked deeds as described over and over again. There's a them and him thing going on, though. That's the thing, is like, I guess he's talking about a specific enemy and then just enemies in general. I suppose that's because he talks about if it had been someone who hated me. Well, there are people who hate him, he talks about in this. There are those that hate him. What it sounds like is someone has betrayed him. It sounds like a psalm that's dealing with a betrayal to wicked men. So meaning, I have a friend now. I have enemies against me, and then I have a friend who betrays me to my enemies. And so he's lumping his former friend, in with the enemies. And that's why there's the they, him thing going on. Like, so where it says, like, went too far back. Well, it says, if it was not an enemy that reproached me. But he's talking about enemies, but it's not the enemy that did me the worst harm. Reproach is put for the, because it's not just the reproach. It's that he was reproached and also magnified against him. That means when you make yourself big, to magnify, you make yourself, you try to, this is something I don't have a lot of, like, I guess, well, parents might have a lot of experience with it. Because with a child is the only thing I can think where it's like, I do quite literally lord it over them. Not in a way to be intolerable, I would not want anyone to take that word and then run with it in whatever your imagination might be, because it's like, I'm thoroughly in charge of my children. But on the other hand, in order to maintain that control, you can't make it too confusing for kids. Little kids don't understand a lot of complicated rules. It's just got to be simple. You got to keep it simple. Meaning, the things that are really important. And when you get the really important things right, everything else has a way of falling into line. Like, for example, one point a child, I don't know why I'm talking about that. It doesn't really fit in here. But I think of the times when when I've had to punish a child, like I'm suddenly now, I'm in control. I'm over them. I am magnified. Normally I'm just pretty innocuous. I'm just dad. I'm around. I exist. I'm not really a force at all times. I don't bring about my authority all the time, because it's people who do that become hated. You don't want to, like, abuse your authority, but But then, when someone betrays you, they're doing something similar. It's like that. It's like they've taken a position in opposition to you, as if you had done something wrong. Because betrayal is such a strange thing, because you do nothing wrong. But like with the Lord Jesus, when Judas betrayed him, it's as though he was a criminal. He's being treated like a criminal, because that's why I go immediately to thinking about punishment and stuff like that, and children and parents, because the idea of when you magnify yourself against someone, it's kind of like I'm big, you're small. And the reproach, some of that is partly, because it sounds like conspiracy and stuff against him. from friends. Well, a friend among enemies. So they have no change. People don't fear God because of the lack of immediate change or response. When we do something, there's no like bolt. It doesn't like God doesn't give a sign necessarily. Just float. Suddenly there's a lightning bolt that strikes. Yes, or something like those clouds part. But then therefore they fear not. Mostly I take the understanding of that based on when it says they have no changes, because that is the point. But let me see. See, they try to associate that phrase in the NIV with the previous clause. God, who's enthroned from old, who does not change, he will hear them and humble them because they have no fear of God. That's the NIV. I'm not a big fan of NIV anyways. Even the one who sits enthroned from ancient times. Yeah, because there's a Selah there. That is an example of the NIV really egregiously, I think. How can you jump the Selah? You know what I mean? Because they take this little dash. That's the Selah. But they flipped the clauses. I don't buy it, man. I don't like that at all. I do not think that's right. And here we have the New American. Selah, they go the same route, but they don't flip the verses. They say, with whom there is no change. See, so yeah, so they go, with whom there is no change, and who do not fear God. He has put forth his hand. Oh wait, sorry. I assumed it was in the right spot, but it wasn't. Okay. This is the New American Standard Bible. So they go, God will bear and humiliate them, even the one who sits enthroned from ancient times. Selah, that's very similar to the King James. With whom there is no change, and who do not fear God. See, it is a difficult verse. That's why the NIV went so radical in their translation, because I do think that's a radical that's too radical for me, because I don't think you create clarity. You should, I mean, that's fine for an interpreter, but again, I just really don't think. I think that kind of interpretation should be left to teachers and not to translators. Though, I don't mind the existence of that kind of a translation. Just when you use it, you should know what you're reading. You're not reading just a translation of the Bible. You're reading an interpretation, a translation that's also a bit of an interpretation that tries to get at it goes a little bit beyond what's on the page and into, okay, when we have a difficult passage, the NIV says, okay, let's get creative here. I'm sure that's not how they say it, but yeah. But they definitely flip these around. The thing is, there's a Selah there. Divided. That's why the New American Standard leaves it the way it is, because it's not something. It doesn't. I mean, look at that. I mean, there is a Selah right in the middle of the verses. I mean, that. So, anyways, instead of because, a lot of times these prepositions drive me nuts. Or because is a conjunction, sorry. But these different words they use, I'm like, is it a conjunction? Well, because that's the thing. Is in the Hebrew, is it really a conjunction there? Is it really a preposition there? I look at this, God will hear, with whom there is no change. It could be because or with whom. And unfortunately, that's I'm not a scholar, and so we're left at that point, and we just have to accept it as it is, at least in this study. With whom there is no change, and who do not fear God. They do not change. They do not fear God. I like that too. That's kind of the more way, people don't change, and But when it says because, that's where the King James gets me. Because I'm like, it says because. I'm like, come on. So it's not there's not a causal relationship being here detailed in the scripture. That bugs me a bit. Because they put a because there and a therefore. Sounds like they were trying to, connect these tightly. Whereas in the New American Standard, it feels more like he's listing off. They have no changes. They do not fear God. He hath put forth his hand against such as be at peace with him. He hath broken his covenant. So there we have, they have no changes. They fear not God. We're going back to the they, him thing. They have no changes. They fear not God. He hath put forth his hand such as be at peace with him. He hath broken the covenant. He put forth his hands against the peaceful. He's broken his covenant. But I still say that there's also something, if you're looking at a causal relationship, I could see, then again, because things don't change, people don't fear God, if it's causal. That's what the King James gave us, and that's what it gave me. And again, I feel a bit foolish in a sense, because like I said, I'm like, I don't know if I should trust that. Not foolish, but like it leaves me feeling like I'd like to know better. Well, let's go back to it's probably going to be one. See, like, look here, this one right here. See how it highlights the whole because of the voice? It's because that's one word in Hebrew. You have to actually understand how it's constructed to be able to understand, okay, is that an appropriate, because it probably does mean because in certain contexts. But you have to understand Hebrew fully to know when to apply that, and to know whether the New American Standard is doing a better job, or at least to be able to weigh in with an opinion. And that's where I kind of fall short as a teacher, is like I don't have that level of knowledge. But then you get, it's trade-offs, Because someone who has that level of knowledge about Hebrew might conduct an extremely boring Bible study. So. Because they have no changes. Notice the whole thing's highlighted. That means there's just one word there that's relating that whole idea. It's like, Adumbajabada, whatever. I mean, I can click on it. I mean, why don't we just click on it, Paul, and let's find out. I was close. Wasn't I close? Like, oh, wait, you can't see it. Ready? That's it. I was close. Shahalipa. Shahalifa. Or Khalifa. A change. And again, it'll probably give, how many times is it even used in the Bible? Let's see. A good number on that right-hand side. What, 12? That's enough to give you some context. But again, it's not the word change that I'm worried about. It's the how they get the because in there. Just change. Change. No God fear. I mean, maybe it is exactly what it is. But there's some expression of this. Here it says, a changing, varying. Okay, I thought these are different. Okay, I'm sorry. I was reading this right here. Sorry, I should put it on the full screen. But here this was, here's the lexicon talking about this particular use of the word. When they say of the wicked with whom are no changings, that is, they do evil incessantly, steadily. So he disagrees. The Brown Driver Briggs lexicon that you see right here, that's who we're talking about. They are quite insistent that this is like the King James. So with whom though? So it's not, they don't like the whole because. They're definitely New American Standard, and so there's no strong causal link, but in a sense it is them. They have no changings. Okay. So there we go. That's actually how I used to think about it. So I was right. My changings is that my new opinion of it is it's like I said, it's a correct idea in that people, because God doesn't immediately judge and punish our evil deeds, we don't change, because very often that's the case. It's like, because there's no fear of God in us, that God is going to do anything, we don't alter our behavior. And also, they have no altering of their behavior because they do not fear God. Therefore, may not be the conclusion of the matter, but really there's your causal. And is that Maybe that's what the King James really got wrong, is they forgot where the because belongs. Because maybe it's therefore or they fear. But again, we see just two words here expressing that whole idea. Because, not God will be lo Elohim or something like that. There's like I said, I don't know a lot about the way the language is constructed, so I'm not going to try to wax too eloquent about that. All right, so then we understand that. All right. So verse 20, he put forth his hand. People that harm those that are acting, they're at peace with you, and then you go harming them, putting your hands against those, breaking covenants. You make covenants of peace. The words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet they were drawn swords. This is something you gotta pay attention to, because, that is a fact about human beings, is that they are deceitful with their mouth. Very often, they like it says in the prophets, prophesy not unto us right things, prophesy unto us smooth things, prophesy deceits. Take away the Holy One of Israel from before us. We don't want to see God in His holiness. We want to have deceitful notions. Okay, and also, whenever someone is talking, and it's whatever kind of relationship, whether it's love or like an intimate, like you're considering or whatever, just someone, when they seem too good to be true, because their words are just everything's just they say everything right. It's just all good words. You have to be a little careful. You ought to be cautious, because people often, normal people have human qualities, that make them not, things aren't smooth as butter all the time with people, But sometimes when people are up to no good, they make things extra smooth so that there be no hitch, And I mean, I understand this from a certain visceral level, because, I'm a clever person. And I know when I have in my past, I've gone about to deceive. When I go about to deceive, that it is always the instinct. It's not always a wise decision. But I would instinctively make everything extra nice. Like lay the groundwork, so there'll be no bumps. But honestly, the funny thing is, I think my wife easily attuned to that. Easily attuned to that whole, I was out of character. Being a little too, it makes you think of like in the cartoons, like the Flintstones or something. After Wilma spends a lot of money on a mink coat or something, she's like extra, hi Fred darling, or whatever. I haven't seen that show in years or whatever, but that kind of there's something being concealed behind all the smooth talk. Something dangerous, perhaps. Again, this is deceit in a much more serious way than just like something maybe between two people that are not actually hostile towards each other, but still not good. But someone who actually intends harm. I remember I had a friend who got, I forget what they call it. It's not catfishing, because that's a different thing. Well, it's sort of like that, I guess, if that's what they call it. But he was online, on Facebook, and he became friends with someone he didn't know, but a young woman, 20-something, picture anyways, right? And she's a model, and she's also owns all these businesses, and she's really into me, and she wants to come to America, all this just wow, just an amazing person, just amazing that they'd have that level of success so young, and they're kind of fallen for this, for a middle-aged man, who's not particularly attractive and has no particularly like nothing to say for himself, like doesn't have businesses and other, maybe he's got a job, but she's just amazing and all that, and it's like, yeah, it's too good, it's not real. That's not a real person. So I told him, like, that's not a real person. There's no, that's a fake. Those are pictures of some model, and there's someone really there, but like everything they're saying to you is sounds too good to be true. That's because it is. It's all lies, And sometimes and people do that. Sometimes just for amusement. It makes me think of that. There is this sort of like, you gotta recognize, be careful when people are buttering you up and trying to really make you. That's one of the things I didn't like about Arnold Murray, because eventually, just because of the flattery he always used, if you agree with him, you're pretty smart, pretty sharp, and you have eyes to see, and all that stuff, and then people who don't understand him are a little bit stupid, and all that. And so there's this subtle abuse and praise handed out for when you do the right thing. And I consider that extremely unethical for a teacher to do. For me to manipulate you, I not only am not allowed to do that intentionally, I have to be careful that I don't unintentionally do that, which I've done in the past. I've unintentionally caused people to do things or to take actions that I would have said, oh, no, don't do that. But because of my carelessness with my words, teachers have a greater condemnation, because there's a harsher judgment. You take up God's word in your mouth, there's a responsibility that comes with that. People, they better take it seriously. That's all I can say. You do that. So, but a lot of times it comes in the form of pastors and preachers. They got all the smooth words. They've got everything. Here we have all the scriptures in a line, and here's all the scriptures that prove my point. Leading you astray. It's like, and what's the point? Half the time it's like, send me your money. That's all they want. That's mostly what they want anyways. That's the important thing, so we can carry on this work. It's like, I carry on my work without your money, all right? I'm not waiting for it. And besides, like I said, it's true that it says those that labor of the gospel, it's right for them to make a living of the gospel. It's not wrong. And there's nothing wrong with everyone deserves to earn a living for the work they do. But, God forbid that, but they enrich themselves from the gospel. That's not what Paul said, that they that work in the gospel must grow rich in the gospel. It's extremely unseemly what goes on with people just raking in the cash in the name of Jesus. They better, like I said, it's fine if they've got good purposes with it. A lot of, I think of pastors that they're pastors who do a lot of good work, I guess, with their money they take in. I can only assume. I can't assume. I'm not going to assume they're all just utterly corrupt and there's none of them good, no, not one. Well, they got the Lord with them, presumably. At least some do. And so I assume that their words and their works are going to be not unacceptable before God. So, because some of these things, because like I said, there's enemies. There's false apostles, deceitful workers. They come transformed as the servants of Christ. That's what they look like. They look like they're servants of Jesus. They look just like a normal Christian. Sometimes people have smooth words in their mouth, but there's war. But what they're actually intending for you is not good. That's the point. They may talk there's a lot of good talk. Talk is cheap. The tongue is such a lying little member. I couldn't even remember what I was going to get at there. I couldn't figure out what the is for. I still don't know. A lying little. Excuse me. It's a lying little serpent, is what it is. If you can tame the tongue, you can tame the whole body. can bring all your behaviors into control. If you can actually control that tongue. And, this is, try to do it. We put some effort into that, right? Learn to tame it. It's not, even if I don't have a perfect mastery of it, becoming master of your mouth is a good first step in becoming master of all things that you are to be master over. Meaning your body. We want to have the mastery of the body. We don't want to be led around by our body's passions. I don't want hunger. That's the point of discipline and things like fasting. It's like that I should not be controlled by my passions, by my hunger, by whatever. And that I can endure a bit of hardship for the sake of whatever God asks of me, whatever it happens to be. Cast thy burden upon the Lord, he shall sustain thee. They cast iniquity on you. I definitely felt reading that again that it felt like, the enemy is oppressing me. They cast iniquity on me and wrath. They hate me. It's just they're, I was thinking about how they, excuse me. Well, I don't have it here, but I did a song over a year ago called "Racism is Bad," and I did the cover for the album, and I'm holding a stone, like I'm standing over somebody about to throw a stone, because that's what it's supposed to be. Because their philosophy, unlike that of Jesus, is not let him that is without sin cast the first stone. It is no, to redeem yourself from the racism of the past, you must now hunt down racists now and find them and drum them from popular society. The throwing of stones is a metaphor because they're not, But so some people, being given leave to hate certain people means, when they have, because when they have not the teachings of Jesus, which say love your enemies, where we can interpret this through a Christian lens. David's feelings towards his enemies are completely natural, but we know the right thing is, we know that ultimately that God, is the judge. But before I go into that, because I could sense myself getting off on a thing there. What it is when we dehumanize people and treat them like they're offenders when they're not offenders. When they're offenders because they've been accused by someone else or because just we're looking for someone to persecute. We're because this movement, this anti-racism stuff is like a movement. It's like a stoning, just looking for someone to stone. It's just it's like a mob just wandering around hunting for someone that they can blame. It's a very unchristian kind of construction of a social unit. This like woke mob type thing, right? Well, once you've defined someone as the enemy, and once you've defined them as this other, once you define them as the undesirable, or in this case, they're a racist or something like that, or they're in a category of persons that is somehow unredeemable. Now, things that would normally be wrong to do to other people, like they had that, like punch a Nazi. It's okay to punch them because they're a Nazi. That's what they would say. What I'm saying is they give themselves permission. Because I wouldn't punch a Nazi, not unless he was, I would rebuke a Nazi because that's the appropriate response. You do not punch them unless they are to engage in unless they're coming at you with violence, and then you might punch them, or you give them I recommend a forearm, or a knee, but not a punch necessarily, unless you like breaking your hands. The point is, they give themselves permission to do iniquity to people who are, whereas killing is normally wrong. We caught this woman in adultery, so we can kill her, right? It's okay now. We can stone someone because we want to kill. Murder is in our heart. Oppression is in our heart. We want to hurt people. That makes us feel good. That makes us feel alive. That's what's in the hearts of people sometimes, especially people who want to go around and find out people that have said, like, racial words that we now deem unacceptable, that used to be more acceptable, that I've certainly said. And, I'm not going to let anyone record me saying them, though. I'm not stupid. You know what I mean? No way. Everyone said the bad words. You have to say them at least once. I'm sure there's someone who's like, oh, I've never said it. Not even in a closet somewhere. Not even when you were like 10 or something like that, when you were little. You didn't say the naughty word to yourself? Well, good for you. Some people are very, very good. But I'm a little bit skeptical, as you can tell, though. And I don't care for holier than thou. As the Lord does not either. He doesn't care for it either. He refers to it as a smoke in his nose. Yes, we all want to be good. We shouldn't use, that's a terrible reason to pick on someone or to discriminate against them, is their immutable characteristics, like their race and their sex and all that stuff. It's not a good reason to treat someone differently, at least in a moral sense. It's like there's no reason at all. When someone, there are reasons to treat males and females differently, but they're not moral reasons. They're practical reasons, There are lots of practical reasons to treat people different based on certain aspects of their external, life. It's more than just external, but on certain aspects that are immutable. But certainly not arbitrarily. Where it's just like, because your skin is different colored, now you don't get to eat in certain restaurants. Whatever. And I'm not going to go into vaccines. Nope. Not going to talk about it. He shall sustain thee. He shall never suffer the righteous to move. Cast thy burden upon them. So, as they cast iniquity on us, that's sometimes the burden you have to bear, is that people are willing to do things to you that are wrong, that they shouldn't be willing to do. But because they think of you as an enemy, they're willing to do to you. That's why I think the meaning of they cast iniquity upon me is that they, and that because in a sense, as we cast our burden on the Lord, they cast their iniquity. They make him bear, as Jesus bore our iniquity. So the heathen the enemies make him bear their iniquity, meaning they have iniquity. They're doing evil deeds towards him, and he has to bear it. And what the Lord says often, and Jesus says this also, take my yoke upon you, take my burden up, he says. Let me have your burden, but take my burden. My yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Now that may seem like an interesting thing for me to say, because as because as a teacher, I do emphasize a bit the sacrifice nature of the Christian walk, and the fact that God does expect much of us. I think as far as to whom much is given. I guess I should say I think he expects much of me, and maybe it's part of the way I was raised. I could be wrong about that. God may say, Paul, you did fine. There was no, but because when I was a child, they always told me I was gifted and that I was not performing, I wasn't, he's not using all his abilities. He's not living up to expectations. I was always I was always underperforming for some reason. I was in the top 5% of SAT scores, and I was underperforming because I wasn't I wasn't at the level where I could be a national merit scholar, where the real brainy people are. So I was gifted. I should have studied harder. I probably would have, if I had studied, I could have done better on the test. That's what I'm saying. It's I always feel like, gosh, I should have done more. I should have done better. I should be farther. And I don't know if any of that's true, because it's just been drummed into me from my youth. I don't know if that's the Lord. So I always feel like this sense of, and so I don't know if I bring my own, that's what I mean about, I don't mean to mislead anybody. The yoke of Christ is easy. I mean, he does ultimately ask us our lives. But as far as like what he asks for his salvation is nothing. I mean, to take on the mercy of God requires you do nothing except receive it. You know what I mean? God stands with his arm out, his arms open, and offer. It says, "Look I'm here to give you mercy through my Son. Believe in him." And it's so simple. It's so, and do you have to? And what do you have to offer yourself in this bargain? Nothing. Nothing except just to accept. But of course, in accepting what you accept, in accepting is that you receive salvation at no price, but God is going to also come into your life and change it and change you, if there's any time. Not unless you're like the thief on the cross who's going to die in 5 minutes, in which case, whatever. God does things in his own way. But in my life, I don't think what God asked me is hard, actually, though. I say he wants us to do. I feel like sometimes maybe I think that. Maybe I think, well, what God asked of me is hard. All right, is it? Is it really hard? Or is it hard? It's not that it's hard. It's that I have temptation. It's that I have lust. That's hard. That's the hard part. The hard part is me. I'm the difficult part. But God makes it easy because I just put my faith in him. I put my trust in him. And now I received, okay, I have to do all these hard things. Lord, how do I do all these hard things? How do I do these things that are too hard for me because I'm a human being with a human nature and I have a sinful nature. I can be tempted. I have passions. How can I be like you? And then that great burden becomes very easy because ultimately it is his work. We are his workmanship created in Christ Jesus unto good works, that even the taking on of the burden of becoming Christ-like becomes relatively easy because we have the help of God's Spirit. The only hard part is the parts of us that have to die. The old nature, the sins of the past, to truly leave them in the past. To be able to step away from the sins that got us into the mess in the first place is a real challenge. And but that is not the burden Christ has put on us, because he's forgiven us of all those sins. So he has not put that burden on us. But he has given us the burden to be righteous. But he's given us that in him. So we have it already. So there's not this like red alert. You're gonna, if you've taken on Christ, but now if you don't get your life right, he's gonna dump you. That's not how it works. Cast your burden on the Lord; He will sustain you. We put our trust when we keep faith with God and continue to trust in Him and to turn to Him in our distress, and to not to turn to and to turn to Him. That's the thing. Is like as we are in Him, we do make we should turn to none other. I mean, I don't mean like that you can't take counsel with a friend. I mean, or another believer. I mean, like using other things to, like drugs and alcohol, type things to escape. We should get away from the temptations and the harshness of the world through the Lord. That's where we ought to find our peace. And that's where we can truly find peace. It's like I always, I've never had more peace than when I'm completely in alignment with God's will. When I felt myself truly, even though if I wasn't, even though it was only maybe for a moment, a brief window of time, when it's like when I felt like I was walking on water, literally in a sense, because I felt like my sins were all gone, and I had yet to see anything manifest itself in my life again. And it felt so freeing. And it's, and then frustrating at the same time, because I feel like, okay, God will never suffer the righteous to be moved. But in what way? Certainly like I said, it's like I've still made mistakes in my life. Recently, I mean, not big, huge, life-ending, major, oh my God, what'd you do type of mistakes, but whatever, stuff that I just, small things that I'm not proud of, But I don't think that's what he means as far as stuff of the righteous. The righteous are never moved in the sense of that they're always, they have the judgment of God on their side. The righteous have God's judgment. When we stand righteous against the wicked, we can stand with a certain confidence of knowledge to know that the judge sees all. You know what I mean? And so, I've already dealt with all my sins in the Lord, through the Lord. Taking them to Him, my sins have gone before me to judgment. When I get there, that's not going to be an issue. I'm not going to be talking about my sins. All the Lord's going to be saying, so what have you been up to, Paul? What have you got? What'd you get done for me? And I'm going to say, Lord, well, I've done such and such and such and such. And He's going to say what He's going to say, which is probably, which I fully expect to be well done. Well done. Good. You did your part. It's like, I don't think it's going to be like, Paul, you were capable of so much more. I don't think He's going to say that. And I would like to be given length of life so that I can feel I have the confidence that I did get to do everything I had in me. As well, I don't think I can work any faster than I do have a wide amount of work I can do. I don't think I can produce things faster, but I can certainly produce more things if I have more time. I'm nowhere near running out of ideas for songs and stuff. And including scripture songs. I still got to finish Isaiah. So we are never moved in God. We are never moved out of God's favor. We are always, when we have God before us and we are before God, so to speak, we have our eyes on Jesus and Jesus has his eyes on us. We cannot be moved. No one can move us from our place in God. Like what we have in the Lord, our relationship with Him, no man can touch that. No man can hurt that. No man can interfere with that. No man can come between me and my Savior. No man can come between me and my judge. Men can try to interpose themselves, but I know that God will be there to judge them. I know my judgment is with the Lord. And so I will not be moved. Not from my position. Not in that respect. Not from my ultimate position, which is I stand before God. I stand right in front of Him. That's where I am all the time. That's where I have to be. And that's the place from which I cannot be moved. Because, why? Because God will not suffer me to be moved. It's like, no, He stays there. But God, thou shalt bring them down to the pit of destruction. The enemies, those who would destroy God's servants, those who would come between God and His servants. Those who would seek to move the righteous from where God has placed them. He will not suffer that. There are some things in the universe that are immutable. They do not change. They cannot be changed. You know what I mean? Not by men. They're part of the order. The righteous stand before God where they stand. And they do not move. You understand what I mean? That's a metaphor. That is their standing with God. And that is where they stand. In a metaphorical sense. That means they have, because the righteous, because the Lord loves the righteous. And obviously I'm not the righteous in myself. I don't embody that, but through Christ I am. And I occupy the position of those that cannot be moved. They're truly righteous because I am through Christ. All my sins are washed away in the sight of God, and therefore I stand before him righteous. But thou, O God, shalt bring them down to the pit of destruction. Bloody and deceitful men shall not live out half their days. Well, that's a hopeful thinking. There's also Psalms where it talks about, well, certainly bloody men who get into blood and all that generally do not, deceitful men. It's one thing, some deceitful character, The Psalms and Proverbs talk about guys who, the wicked who prosper in their ways, and they seem to get away with it. They even get to old age. There's wicked old characters who are still alive, right? We know. I mean, I think one might be running the country. and so, and they live a long time sometimes. But men who get blood on their hands in a literal sense, that kind of work does not usually lead to a long life. Bloody men whose business is betrayal and bloodshed. I mean, literally, like assassination and stuff like that. I'm sure there are retired assassins out there. That's just why, I always imagine I run into a guy like, I'm an assassin. I'm retired. I don't want to meet a retired assassin. If you're a retired assassin, don't tell me about it. I don't want to hear about it. Because that'll prejudice me against you. Because I just don't, I won't, and it's hard to trust someone who tells you that, Because either they're lying or they're an assassin. So in which case do I trust them? Neither. It's like announcing, don't trust me. Again, God will bring them down to the pit of destruction. That is the end of the wicked. They go to the pit of destruction. They go down alive into hell. And what is that hell? It is a pit of destruction. It's where they are destroyed. Fear not them that can destroy the body, but afterwards they can do nothing more. But fear rather him who can destroy both soul and body in Gehenna. But this is not Gehenna. This is hell. Hades, Sheol. Hades in the Greek New Testament would be the word they would use, but here it would be Sheol. I don't have to look at it; it's just is what it is. I mean, let's. Am I right? Am I too arrogant? It's not arrogance. It's just, am I too confident? Overly confident. Hell is Sheol. It says right there. I looked it up real fast on this. The quick here. Yep, I was right. If you look it up, you'll find the same thing. Now, Sheol is the Hebrew word used to describe the place where the dead go. And it is a place of destruction and corruption and such. It is described as a pit because it is often referring to literally a grave, because it can mean that, the pit of the grave. There is a word for a grave also. It doesn't mean grave, okay? And there is a bit of the exact nature of Sheol. It was the word they used in their language to describe the place where the dead are. Okay, and so in and of itself is a mystery to some degree. I mean, it's a mystery. One of the mysteries of life is people seek out the answer to, well, what happens when you die? We know what happens externally. We know the body ceases to function. Whatever life was there is now gone. The living ceases. They stop breathing. We know breathing has something to do with it, right? They must respire. But then suddenly, it's funny, there's not a lot of difference between a living person and a dead person, like a moment later. It's just they've stopped. The essence of what is keeping them going has stopped. It's broken down. And but then they say, well, what about the essence of the person that is missing now? Does it go somewhere? The scriptures say the spirit returns to God that gives it. I don't think the spirit is the same thing as the person, but Some people do. And it creates, like I said, there's that tug of war between wanting to believe that when people die, that in our time frame, like that if I died, you would all see me dead, and then while you were looking at me, I would be off doing something else with God at the same time. But what I believe is that when you die, the next thing that happens is the resurrection of the dead, and you are in the future, essentially, at that point. And so that when people die in our time, they just don't have anything more to do with this world, as far as I'm concerned. There's no point in them sitting and watching and all this stuff like the people think is all this mythology about death. I just don't believe any of it. I believe the dead rise, and also that the spirit of life, which enters into us, must return, so that we can return to life, and that God will make man alive again, just as he made him alive at the beginning, from the very dust of the earth. That there's no, that is how God brings us into being, through having a body that is actually made of stuff. All right. Okay, so, but I will trust in thee. Okay. That's what we ought to do. Trust in God. The wicked have, even if they live out those days, it is given unto men once to die and afterwards the judgment. And as it said in the psalm, a couple psalms back, or was it 54 or 53, I think it was. This is the man who made not God his strength. It's actually 52, right? Yeah, well, it was more like 53. Whatever. But you remember the passage. This is the man that made not God his strength. What a fool. He did not make God his strength. He trusted in his iniquity, or in his iniquity and in his riches. Now I want to look it up. Okay. Huh. I know it's after 51, so it must be 52. Huh. Oh, whatever. That's annoying. I really want, the longer it takes me to find it, the more I want to find it. How much time do I have? No time. Okay. Never mind. I was going to read through Psalm 56. We're just going to pick it up with 56 tomorrow. Upon Jonathan Requiem. Oh, so that belongs with, that actually belongs with this chapter, if we continue what I talked about in study number 88. And I've talked about it many times, so I'm not going to talk about it now. I'm just going to do it. Jonathan Requiem. What? Let's go. Let's see what that's about. I didn't even know that was a word in the Bible. Okay. I've read this before, but it's been a long time since I read this psalm, apparently. Okay, so they put it with 56. It's okay. Upon what? Dove of distant silences. Probably the name of a melody. Dove of distant silences. Okay. Well, that would go with the, if that goes with the previous psalm. There's a dove. He does say that in Psalm 55, doesn't he? So there's your dove of distant silences. I mean, it's literally in that one. That's a good, evidence that whole put that that subscription with the previous psalm seems appropriate. That's one of them where it seems obvious. Okay. So we'll continue in 56 tomorrow. Thanks for joining me this day. I look forward to being back again tomorrow. And until then, I'm still looking for that verse, darn it. I'll find it later. All right. Until then. Did I forget the music? Oh, I turned it down. Here we go.
People imagine a vain thing. The kings of the earth set themselves against Yahweh and against his anointed.